our list, we have Ben Levine. He's the director and senior partner at True Global Intelligence, the research and analytics arm of FleishmanHillard UK. He has over 15 years experience. He's a trusted advisor to global brands such as Samsung, Bayer, Philips, helping them turn complex data into clear strategic insights. He was previously the vice president, at Ketchum. He has led data-driven initiatives for companies including MasterCard and Visa across both New York and London. A recognized thought leader in PR measurement, Ben played a key role in shaping the Barcelona Principle 3.0 and the AMEC measurement maturity mapper during his time on the AMEC board. He also frequently speaks as a global voice for communication analytics, known for combining business acumen with a journalistic eye for detail. Welcome, Ben. Next on that list, we have Beatrice. Beatrice Okpara is an accomplished communications professional based here in Nigeria with an extensive experience in corporate and financial sector. She currently serves as the accounts director at Drawbridge Communications Management, and she's the founder and principal consultant at PuzzleCraft PR and Communications. She has held pivotal roles at big name firms such as Stanbic IBTC Bank and even the Central Bank of Nigeria. And she brings strategic insight, leadership to the communication landscape. Welcome, Beatrice. Next on our list, we have Samuel. Samuel Adeyemi is a strategic communications expert. He's the founder and CEO of Media DNA, an integrated marketing firm working with leading public and private sector brands. He serves as public relations officer for the NIPR Lagos chapter. He's the communications lead and global opportunity at the Global Opportunity Community of Atlanta Black Chambers. He promotes cross-border trade, economic inclusion. He also has a background in journalism, PR, and public policy advocacy. Samuel has led major campaigns, including international trade missions, presidential elections. He's a published author, trainer, and he shares his expertise from time to time at workshops and political communication, crisis management, as well as reputation building. And last but definitely not least on our list, we have Adeeba Hussain. I hope I'm doing justice to that name. She's a chartered PR leader specializing in internal communications, employee experience, as well as communications measurement, with experience across sectors such as defense, transport, local government, not-for-profit, as well as aviation. And she has worked with, I think she noted, one of the busiest airports in the UK. We all know which on that list. She has brought strategic insight as well as storytelling expertise to her work. She's also known for leading communications during change and transformation. She combines creativity with analytical rigor to align her message with business goals. She's an active member of the IOLC and a certified member of the CIPR and AMEC board as well. With that, I would also like to one more time say welcome to our speakers. Thank you guys for availing us this time of your day to come in and share insights on today's conversation. Today's conversation on evaluating what matters, right? And this is a conversation that I think is very critical, especially in today's world. The importance of today's conversation, I think, cannot be overstated, especially in the dynamic of the field we all play in. It is undeniable that brands are increasingly defined not just by what they do, but why they do what they do, which brings us to our first P of the day, which is purpose. And purpose has become not just a keyword, but also the foundation of trust, reputation, as well as long-term success for any campaign. But purpose alone, as we will find out, it's not enough. We also need to ask some other questions, like how that purpose is perceived by the customers, employees, investors, regulators, and even the wider community. These important questions help to shape whether the campaigns inspire confidence or they invite, skepticism. And ultimately, we must ask some other questions like how do we measure performance in a way that it reflects not just intent, but also impact. And in doing that, we can truly say we are evaluating what matters. Today's session will explore this critical overlap between how purpose drives perception, how perception influences performance, and how all these three must align for meaningful and measurable success. Like we stated earlier, without doubt, we have a wide pool of knowledge to tap from today. So as I would encourage anyone to have your pen and your notepad ready, because we're about to dive into the depth of knowledge that we have available to us here today. And before we go into today's conversation, I would just like for each of our speakers to give us a brief rundown on their career journey so far, where it all began and where we currently are. So to kick us off on that, I would like to call on Adeeba to take the floor.
Hi, I'm Adeeba Hussain. I'm the founder and director for Think Impact Health Communications. My career in PR and communications goes back well over 20 years ago. I've worked across sectors from local government, private sector and not-for-profit in sort of different disciplines, PR and campaigns, media relations, and I've now sort of steered towards internal communications. This is where my passion lies and where I feel that I sort of give most to the role, but also get the most out of that role, aligns with my personal values. And usually I work alongside organisations whose values align with my personal values. And at the heart of it, I've worked in-house for well over 15 years, but in the last couple of years, I've set myself up, and hence the my organisation's name, Think Impact Health Communications. It's mainly centred around internal communications, but at the heart of that is creating a meaningful narrative, working alongside organisations to create that meaningful narrative and being creative with that narrative. But at the heart of that is measurement and evaluation. It's measuring that content that we're sharing inside organizations, that information that we're sharing, those stories that we're telling, and then trying to make it effective and meaningful and add value to that narrative, and to give it purpose and align it ultimately back to the organization strategy, purpose and objectives.
Thank you very much, Adeeba, for shedding some light into that. Next off, quickly we move on to Beatrice to share our career journey with us.
Hello, Stanley. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks for having me. Hi, Adeeba. Hi, Levine. And okay, I guess the last speaker. It's a pleasure meeting you all. Stanley has spoken so much about me already from my profile, but unlike I pivoted to technology and finally found myself in corporate communications. I took on early retirement from the central bank last year in December so that I can start my own PR and communications consulting firm. So I am Beatrice Izeagbe Okpara. I'm the founder and principal consultant at PuzzleCraft PR Communications. Another hat I wear also is the accounts director for Drawbridge. Yes, they're both similar agencies, but we are big on collaboration, so we do that together, and we've been soaring in Abuja. So basically, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, for that. Next up, we have Ben, quick career summary.
Great, thanks, Stanley. Great to be here with you all today. Yeah, my career started over 20 years ago when I was an admin assistant at a PR firm called Finn. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was destined to be a measurement professional because one of my main tasks was to create clipping books. I don't know if people on the line remember clip books, but literally taking newspapers and magazines and cutting out articles, pasting them up and sending them to the client. So after a few years there, I found my way to Ketchum, where I had the opportunity to work with David Rockland, and as they say, the rest is somewhat history. So my engagement within communications, supporting brands with research and insight, all started there at Ketchum, and where I cut my teeth and kind of learned about what it is that we do with, within agency to help clients understand audiences, understand market conditions, look at competitive positioning, etc. So that was an array of workflows and different things that putting to task everything from primary to secondary in measurement and evaluation. And over the last 7 years, I've been I eventually found my way to London, which was fantastic, and had the opportunity to build teams both at Ketchum and now at Fleischman here in the UK. And so my role now is very much working with a variety of, typically global brands from sectors, could be B2B sector, healthcare, those who are looking to speak directly to consumers and supporting them with, really thinking through their measurement strategies. So for us, adhering to, AMEC best practice, being a former and now current board member there, really working with those clients to think clearly about what it is they're trying to achieve as a business. And I know we're going to talk today about impact and purpose, and that's certainly a key part of it. And then, thinking through, depending on what that end goal is, then working with those to then understand the role that communications in all its forms plays, and delivering that and helping them to have that as central and use that data, that intelligence and measurement, not just to look back at how well did we do, but then what does this mean going forward in terms of how we can communicate better. And I think equally too, is there any learning and insight that we can bring back to the business that is useful to other stakeholders within organizations. So that's just a little brief journey. It's never would have thought getting into it that PR measurement would have taken me from New York all the way to London, and the opportunity to be here with you all today and have conversations like this on a regular basis. So thank you, Stanley, and everyone else.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben. I think you already started to talk a bit about today's conversation. I think it just happens when you're a professional and you have so much on board to share, but we'll get into that. Samuel, I think we'll have your career breakdown next. Just a quick summary on where it all started and where you currently are. Samuel, I'm not sure you heard me. Okay, we lost Samuel. Maybe we'll just wait. Okay.
It is showing again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, apology. Actually, I'm at an event here in Abuja, and the group is on lockdown because we have about 3 presidents that are in the hall. So I have to step out of the hall, and the group is on lockdown. The network has been jammed. So, but I hope you can be able to just hear me. Can I go on? Can you hear me now?
Yes, you can go on.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Like I mentioned, I just apology if there's noise in the background. So I started my career as a journalist in the early 20s. Started my career as a journalist, and then from being a journalist, I advanced into PR, political communication. Then I started working in a political communication firm, and from there, I moved to another agency that was handling another political communication project. And then before I started my own firm, 2016, that was focused on PR, marketing communication, and crisis communication. So it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Samuel, for that. So without doubt, we can all tell that we have a fantastic line of speakers and panelists today who bring a wealth of experience, both from corporate communications, brand strategies, measurements, as well as stakeholder engagement. And so a few housekeeping rules before we begin. To our speakers, we have you for about an hour left, and we would like to keep to that because we all know we have busy schedules to get back to, and so our answers should all fit into that frame. Also, if we have questions for those listening, maybe we just hold on to those questions, and at the end of the section or segment, we can have a Q&A where those questions are treated. So to kick us off on today's conversation, I would like to call on Ben. In your view as a PR professional, how do you think PR teams can better define and measure purpose in today's communication landscape?
Yeah, thanks, Stanley. So my view, is that when it comes to thinking about incorporating measuring purpose or thinking about purpose from communications, I mean, the first thing it has to start with is the values that an organization holds. And by that, I mean, what is the integrity? How do they treat their employees? How do they think about their role within community and stakeholders? And I think if you have those values well defined, well understood, then when it comes to, I guess the stage before that, before measuring it, would be to think about how to communicate these values. And so I think an important part of that, even before you get to the phase of, let's say, broadcasting values, messaging, trying to promote your organization, is to ensure you're engaging in a listening exercise with those stakeholders, internally, externally, right? Because I just think it's an underutilized step in the process with organizations at times to truly listen and to ensure that the values they're considering, or the values that they're adopting and adhering to, that it's not just a monolithic or a very single view. And I know lots of organizations do that, right? But I just think it's important, kind of like framing, to think about that, and then you can communicate about it, and then think about how do these values translate to talking about brand or product, or service, etc. And so if you've gone through that process, then the measurement part of it can be adopted into that framework. So if you think about traditional ways that a business, organization, or any public or private entity might track and measure itself, they'll consider things like brand trackers and look at attributes. They'll think about message delivery, etc. So to me, it really starts with the organization being very clear about what it stands for, that it does so with integrity and honesty, that it engages stakeholders to the process to define what those values are. And if you're coming from that as a starting point, then I don't want to say the rest of it should be easy, but the rest of it should follow in order in that way.
All right, thank you very much, Ben, for that. I think with what you just said, I think you even touched on the 3 Ps we want to focus on today. For the brand to identify their purpose, to listen, that's to understand the perception that is out there both internally as well as external, and also then the final stage of performance, which is like you said, not guaranteed to be easy, but as long as you've identified the first important steps, the rest can follow through. So I'm glad that question went to you to open us. So to break the ice basically on today's event. Thank you very much for that. So next up, I would like to call on Beatrice just to follow up on that conversation. In your opinion, or your expert's opinion, how do you feel like organizations can ensure their intended purpose is perceived genuinely by their audience? The audience being probably the most important part of every campaign. How do you think, or what do you think organizations can adopt to make sure that their intentions are perceived genuinely by the audience, both externally as well as internally?
Okay, thank you, Stanley. Just like Ben said, the organization has to have clarity, right? So it all starts with alignment. There has to be alignment between their messaging, the behavior, and the experience. It's not just enough now to say, okay, we're just saying the things, or we know we are communicating right, or the right things, but the people must see, which are the audiences now, right? They must see and feel the purpose in action. The purpose is the why. Let's say we're looking at policy, for instance, or product or service, whatever that organization is big on. I mean, why crafting that policy? Why crafting the message? Why developing the products? If there is no understanding of the why, which is the purpose we're talking about, there will be a huge misalignment. So internally now, I want to look at it from the internal point of view. It all starts with leadership. So it comes from the top down. It flows from top down. The leaders must live with purpose. They understand the purpose. For starters, they most likely crafted the purpose. So they should live the purpose, not just speak it. Employees need also to understand the why behind every decision. So it goes beyond, okay, management knows it and then just shoves it down the throats of the employees, because the employees are the amplifiers of these things. So they have to understand why. And also the internal processes, the policies, they all there has to be some form of alignment. So there'll be like a reinforcement of that purpose. I've seen situations where communication practitioners struggle with communicating a particular policy or a product the organization developed or a service they're selling, because they don't understand the why. So why is fundamental when it comes to internal communications. So regardless of what is, and that thing I've also noticed again is that one of the reasons we struggle as communication experts with the why of every project or product or policy is because most often when these decisions are taken, when the strategies are being, I don't know how it is outside, but in the Africa and Nigerian context, most often the comms people are not even in the room. They are not on the table to even listen in to understand where the thought process of those people, of the leadership is, to understand what the product or the policy is about. And if they don't have that knowledge, that fundamental knowledge, coming to even educate the staff will be a challenge. I've also seen instances where, say, HR, for instance, will come up with a policy and they're saying, okay, HR drives communication. HR can't drive a communication better than we, the communicators. So there's that misalignment. So basically, internally, charity begins at home. There has to be that alignment. The leaders have to live the purpose. The employees must understand the purpose. Internal policies must reflect it. Then take it externally, on the other hand. Authenticity is key. Consumers and stakeholders want to see the action. They are tired of hearing our stories. I mean, if the average PR practitioner is telling you that I'm a storyteller, I'm a storyteller, I'm a storyteller. People are tired of hearing stories when they don't see action, So show, don't just say. I stumbled upon a 2022 IBM report recently, which says 44% of consumers now choose brands based on how well these brands align with their personal values. Like you have emphasized already, we are in this business, of course, for the organization, but basically for the stakeholders. If we are not able to communicate what the organization is about, what the purpose of whatever that intervention is or the project is all about, these stakeholders, they smell They're able to spot fakes. They're able to spot when we are not living our values, and then they'll call us out. And then that brings about reputation damage. So ultimately for me, when purpose is embedded into every operation, our everyday operations, not just written on our comms decks, we come make the presentations, but we believe it. People won't just hear it, they'll believe it. And that's when trust, loyalty, and real impact begin to grow. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. That was well taken. You did justice to the question, taking it from the internal point of view towards the external point of view. A few points that she raised was establishing clarity, that is from the top brass all the way down to the lower level, making the message sort of uniform, let everyone understand what the goal is, and so it can resonate with the external side, so everyone is speaking the same language, so to speak. Thank you very much, Beatrice, for that. Now we've dealt with, techniques and, happenings, but we want to go into real-world experience now. Adeeba, in your career, your professional journey, what is one defining moment in your career that has reshaped how you view PR, or how you think PR should be evaluated?
I don't, thank you. I don't think there's one defining moment, but I think for me, from my personal experience, over the years, I've been very good at working with organizations, working with senior leaders when it comes to communicating and being tasked to communicate, do the PR. And what I realized is over the years, I've been good at the output, not necessarily looked at the outcome, and not really thought about at all about the impact. And as Beatrice said, the why. That's the really important part of communications and PR, is the one, and that includes internal communications, is the one thing that's lacking is that as practitioners and professionals, we're very good at the task of writing the content, doing the storytelling, doing the campaigns, but how good are we at then measuring that impact? And for me, when I'm working with clients and leaders and organizations, the one question I start with is the Stephen Covey, and I always go back to that quote, begin with the end in mind. So I start with the impact. And so to answer the question, there isn't that sort of one defining moment, but over the years, measurement and evaluation of communications and PR has become pivotal, and it is the most important thing for me as a communicator, as somebody who works in PR, because otherwise, how do I know that my communications is effective, is meaningful, is adding value? So for me, that's what I start with. What do you want your end user, the audience, and in my case, as an internal communications practitioner, what do we want the employees to do as a result of that communications and content that we're sharing with them? The why, what do we want them to do differently? What action do we want them to take? How do we want that information to, land with them? Which channel are we going to use? So that's the most important, the impact of that communications and PR. And for me, that's why I go back to, and that's what I start with. I start with impact and end with impact, the why.
Stanley, I can't hear you.
Hear you either.
You're
I
muted.
thought it was me. My earbuds have died.
Can you hear me now? Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Adeeba, for that. So yes, I was saying, for those of us who are listening, if we're not with our pen and notepads, I think we're missing out, because these first few questions have established just what our guests and speakers have to offer us today. And I can tell from what they said that it all aligns on something, and it's building up to something greater, which I'm sure we will get to the later parts of today's event. But one thing we can keep at the back of our mind is the importance of the why. And that is one thing I think they've all buttressed in their answers. And going forward, I'm sure they will break down both in industry experience, professional experience, organizational growth, and everything, why that why really is important. And so we just move on to more general questions. Samuel, I hope I still have you with us here.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, so this question is for you. How do you balance quantitative PR performance data with qualitative insights such as trust, sentiment, or even brand affinity?
All right, thanks for the question. So the thing is that, in our line of work, we need to balance the two. We need to balance the two because the two are important, but one is more important than the other. So just a bit to answer one of the question that you asked last time from the panelists about, what was the most defining moment for them. So to me, and I will connect it to this answer. To me, it was when I started my business, and then when I run a campaign for clients and send them reports about likes, shares, and all that, and they just like, okay, so how does this affect our bottom line? What's the numbers? How much is coming from this campaign? How much goods and services are we able to, sell as a result of this campaign? To me, that was the defining moment. That's when I started to reassess my team strategy. How do we, deploy strategy? How do we deploy campaigns whenever we have campaign? And as you know, you might say you are in PR, but we are now in a more complex world because everything is now integrated. You can't do marketing without doing PR. You can't do PR without doing advertisements. You can't do advertising without doing digital. So we are now in the world of IMC, integrated marketing communication. And most clients, they are on tight budget. They need results. And if you are not measuring what you are doing, you will not be able to, you will not be able to meet their expectation. So that is, for me, that was the defining moment. So we don't just run a campaign that we just say, okay, we have 1 million likes, we have 3,000 shares and all that. It goes beyond that. Those are important. Those are the quantitative data that needs to be in your report. But of course, what about quality insight as well? Because it's this quantitative performance that would that would trigger and improve your qualitative insights. You understand? They complement each other. So I believe qualitative insights gives you depth, but of course, you need to also be able to put your eyes on the qualitative insights as well. Numbers will tell what happened, but narratives tells us what happened and what needs to be done. And that also talks about being able to, I'm sure in doing when we are in schools, when we are doing communication research and all that, we are told that communication is incomplete without feedback. If you don't have feedback, your communication is not complete. You don't have a communication. So the feedback, that is that is where you need to be able to get what people are saying, how your campaign has performed, and how you need to improve. So qualitative and quantitative, they are both important, but we need to just balance it and make sure that we are getting the right from both ends. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel, for sharing that with us. One thing he harps on is the complementary nature of quantitative as well as qualitative insights, and how these two things cannot work independently, especially in today's world, and the importance of merging the qualitative with the quantitative. The quantitative tells you how far, how heavy, how big, but the qualitative will tell you other aspects as far as improving on that already established status, and looking for a different route for future campaigns. Thank you very much, Samuel. Okay, we want to talk to Ben. You play in international space, so I want to ask you this question. Seeing as you also moved from New York to London, I'm sure those are very different markets. What are the risks of applying global PR metrics without considering geopolitical or economic shifts?
Yeah, I mean, this is in our organization, and I think a lot of the larger networked agencies who work for big global clients, this is very top of mind for a variety of reasons. So I think not taking kind of geopolitical, I guess when we talk about geopolitical risk and economic concern, what comes to mind to me is everything from policy, regulatory environments to changing priorities within governments to supply chains to trade deals, tariffs. All of that is encapsulated within, I think, what we're discussing here. And the reason you have to take that into consideration, you're thinking then about, well, how do I measure communications? And it kind of ties back to, I think, a point Beatrice made when talking about starting with the why from a communications purpose. The why of like that impact of communications is equally important. And what I mean by that is, if you're not calibrating, well, let me take a step back. Sorry, like traditionally, if you think about global media intelligence programs, you're listening to social conversation, you're listening to, or you're collecting media. You're doing that across channels in these times. So you want to be focused on visual and audio media as well, right? So that's just to underpin the point that even before turbulent geopolitical upheaval over the last several months, that the complexity of trying to understand communications was as complex as it's ever been. It's only going to get more complex, in my opinion. So if you're operating in that environment already and you're just looking at, kind of some of the things that Samuel was just touching on, just the quantitative output of your communications, you're going to miss all of the context, all of the nuance that is important to keep track of. And so if you're, for a lot of the clients that we work for, they're some of our largest clients. They're not necessarily B2C clients. They're operating in healthcare. They're operating in heavy industrials. They're operating in energy, etc. Right? So there's just so many channels they need to be aware of, conversations they need to be aware of, and issues that affect their business, not just in the way they need to communicate and should be communicating, but could have an impact on their, license to operate, their tangible business. So increasingly clients, so the context is important, understanding the why and what is happening. And I think what that also does too, if we're, not only is that, I think, valuable on the face of it, but it's also helping agencies like ours, I think professionals within PR and comms, having that lens, starting to be seen more as business counselors for clients, being able to offer perspective and advice. So it's really important because I think, the job of communicators, of PR professionals is pretty complex, right? It can change every single day. It seems like things are changing every single day. So not having that built into your system to be as well informed to respond and advise is a big miss when it comes to measurement. So it's just taking it a step further. Don't just count and track what's out there, but help your clients, your stakeholders understand the context and the nuance that exists within all that media. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ben. So if we have questions concerning the conversation going on, like I said, we just pen them down, and towards the end, we'll have a Q&A question session directed at our speakers. So continuing on the journey of purpose, perception, and performance, let's hear from Beatrice. What is one trend, economic, political, or even technological, that PR professionals should keep watch on?
Thank you, Sandy. I would have said AI, yes, AI, artificial intelligence, it is, but something that, another trend that is heavy on my mind is actually perception resilience in an era of misinformation. You know, there's so much noise going on in today's communication ecosystem landscape. You know, you see misinformation even flying faster than facts. So for me, I think PR professionals should keep a watch at it. PR professionals must now try to design systems that build reputation resilience. You know, this brings to mind Coca-Cola. I had this conversation with one of my bosses some time ago. You know, Coca-Cola as a brand has built resilience. They've gone beyond trying to be reactionary to knowing that, look, they are fortified to a large extent. In Africa here, you'll see different YouTube videos on how you can use Coca-Cola to clean tiles, clean this and that, you know, how you use it as a sanitary liquid. And it gets you thinking, what happens to your intestines when you drink this? But it hasn't stopped us from drinking it, you know, so reputation resilience. And like I've said before, one of the caps I wear is I work as an accounts director for Drawbridge. This is something we've been able to crack to a large extent. You know, we have a framework called PRISM, and PRISM is basically protecting reputation through insight, strategy, and management. So it's a comprehensive reputation management service that is designed, and we've deployed it for some institutions, and we've been able to manage their reputation, help them build resilience. And I feel PR practitioners should actually keep an eye on that. The AI bit of this whole reputation issue is with the prevalence of deepfakes, you know, where they'll just clone you, clone your speech, clone your voice. I mean, and you are talking with us, it's not you. Then what happens when that kind of information goes out if you don't even have a framework to tackle reputation? So you just find yourself as a PR practitioner trying to react every time, jumping from pillar to post. So that's one trend I think we should look out for. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think Beatrice harps on professional preparedness, being aware of how your perception can be protected, even in the event of, you know, misinformation, you know, staying ahead of the story, staying in control of story and perception. Thank you very much, Beatrice. And I think things are getting warmed up. We're getting into the sector or the section of today's event where we have more targeted questions towards our guest speakers. These are questions that are tailored towards their industries, towards their everyday activities, so we can pick insights from the things they do on a day-to-day basis that has put them on top in their various fields. So we'll go into deep dive questions. First off, I would like to call on Adeeba. As an internal communications specialist, how do you evaluate purpose within the organization? You know, and how do those internal perceptions influence external reputational performance?
So I'm quite old-fashioned in that I still use sort of qualitative methods such as focus groups, interviews, surveys, and those conversations with line leaders and line managers, those conversations between leaders and their teams, but also between the communications practitioner like myself and those employees that work in an organization. For me, purpose is aligned to your values as an organization, and you measure, when you come to measuring purpose and values, you're measuring the behavior, which is more tangible to measure. The data is fine, data is good, it's a good starting point. But I think you then need to find out the why behind the data. So, for instance, you know, are the values and the purpose, is it meaningful to the employees? Is it being, can you see that in their behavior? For example, I've done a lot of work with organizations around safety and safety practices, and it's good to have safety objectives in your strategy, overall strategy as an organization. But how do you know that those safe practices are being put into the day-to-day with employees, how employees are looking after each other? And you measure incidents of unsafe practices. That's how you would measure, and ultimately that's aligned back to your objectives, which part of your values are part of your objectives and purpose, and it's easier to measure, and you do that through employee surveys that are undertaken either once a year, or pulse surveys that happen every month or quarterly. But you also measure that through sort of conversations. And when it comes to sort of active listening conversations, you need to build in there, especially if it's around safe and unsafe practices or safe practices, that element of sort of psychological safety. And it's making sure that when an employee goes to their line leader or manager about some unsafe practice they've seen, that platform is safe, psychologically safe. The leader will not only listen to them, will actively listen to them, but will also offer them that sort of pastoral care and that platform to be able to share safely within that platform or within that conversation. And then what you're measuring there is the tangible conversations around what is wrong, what is right, and then you're using those insights to then further improve what you need to improve. And in this case, it would be an unsafe practice you would try to make safe. And that, for me, is how you measure purpose, values, because otherwise values are, you can measure values in that you're measuring the behavior, which is the tangible element of measurement and evaluation. Hope that helps answer the question. Haven't waffled.
I guess Stanley was thrown out of the meeting.
Oh.
Yeah, so
I'm just going to say that ultimately, and I didn't say this earlier either, is that for me, it's aligning everything back to your strategy and objectives and purpose. So the impact and the why is ultimately through this sort of golden thread that you really can't see, is aligned back to and connected back to that impact is connected back to your strategy and purpose and objectives. You seem to have lost.
Hello, so sorry for that.
So,
yeah, my own event drew me up. Apologies all around. Adeeba, I probably missed a very good part of what you said, but I'm sure everyone else.
No, I can recap. I was just saying that for me, the impact or the measurement, the why that you're measuring is ultimately linked, connected back to your purpose. And for me, your purpose, the thing that you can measure when it comes to your purpose is the alignment to your values as an organization. And values for me, and this is the way I measure them, is through the behavior and the change in behavior or not change in behavior, because I do believe that behavior, you can change behavior and you can measure it because it's something that it's tangible, that you can get, touch, and it's that qualitative measurement, the why, the impact and the outcome of that communications campaign, values sharing that you're doing as an organization.
Thank you very much, Adeeba, for also recapping on that. Thank you very much. She talks about behavior being a more tangible medium to evaluate, and I think that is agreeable. because behavior can change over time, and being able to experience behavior firsthand, because she mentioned, I think I got a bit of that she employs old-fashioned methods to carry out surveys. Thank you very much, Adeeba, for shedding light.
And talking to your employees.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Adeeba. So next up, we want to talk to Samuel, if he's still here with us. With your expertise in communications, right? Which performance metrics do you find most critical in evaluating purpose-led PR?
All right. Thank you. For me, the most important one is the campaign objective. So what are the campaign objectives that we have before we start the campaign? Because we know that the campaign objective will determine the kind of strategy we deploy, the kind of tactics we are deploying. So those are the major thing we keep eye on, the campaign objective. And then when the campaign is done, we ask ourselves, do we really achieve all the objectives that we list out in the campaign objective, the communication objective? Those are the questions we ask ourselves. And of course, I may say I'm also that old school guy in terms of how I measure, still use, survey, focus groups, and of course, asking questions from our clients, their perception, because you may think that you've done a good job, but what is your client saying? And the major thing as well, which I mentioned earlier on, the bottom line, especially when we are doing marketing communication campaign, and of course, if you are even doing political communication campaign, the bottom line is, did the clients win the election? Did he get the large chunk of, the mind share of the voters? So those are the things that we keep eye on and make sure that, we are getting those objectives right. That is where we put our focus on majorly. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Samuel, for that. He spoke about campaign objective, identifying campaign objective. I think with what he says, that ties into a much broader scope, because once you can identify the objective of a certain campaign, you can then fit in all the other, parts as you go. Thank you very much, Samuel, for that. I'd like to call on Ben again to share an example. Now, we've talked about techniques, we've talked about metrics to adopt, but we want to talk about real life experience. So I would like for Ben to share with us an example where data on global perception shaped a PR strategy, and how you evaluated its effectiveness on brand trust.
Sure. Thanks, Stanley. So we a fair bit of this work for, I mentioned previously that we worked for a lot of global healthcare companies. So I can't name the company, but the one comes to mind. And what they wanted to do was to really understand perceptions of their brands as a medical device company in markets around the world. So the process we went through with them on that it's going to kind of echo and be similar to some of the things we talked about, but it was starting with a framework, and within that framework, it was identifying, what it is that they needed and wanted to communicate on, and this, was all about, safety, efficacy of this particular medical device, and to do that, then we'd identify who the stickers we really need to communicate with. And so we focused on healthcare professional audiences who were part of the value chain in terms of both might play a role in whether or not a health system in the UK or Germany or and other markets might choose to purchase this product, as well as those who would have a role in speaking to patients about it. So once you've kind of identified, what it is you need to communicate on relative to business goals, think about the audiences, then it's about developing that framework. And so a framework around perceptions. So what are the what are the kind of looking at this particular organization? What were the attributes? What were the messages they wanted to communicate? So we started with a study, multi-market survey that helped establish those benchmarks. And within that, it then gave us insight into performance on things relative to their brand, relative to reputation, and indeed purpose. And once we had that as those kind of audience insight, we use those to then inform how do we need to be communicating, where should we be thinking about and engaging with those healthcare professionals. That was both, thinking about off and online channels, that was an element of it. And then that you kind of use that to build the strategy around it, to then think about what do we need to have in place from a tracking and measurement perspective. And as these are a bit longer term campaigns, so as we it took time to kind of get to that point, and then we're able to build a comprehensive strategy around the data collection across those channels, be it media, social, but then also, for some of the more one-to-one in-person engagements, thinking through what are things that within the organization for this client that they should be tracking that might not appear in channel. And then once that was stood up, deployed, because a quarterly report and tracking for them going forward. And it really just helped them kind of see from the start to the beginning, how do we understand the audience, understand that market context with those audiences, and use those insights to build strategy and then have a plan to measure it going forward. So that's just a typical case or an example of how we go through the process for the global client.
Thank you very much, Ben. He's given us a very clear, extensive case study on personal experience of his, professional experience of his, rather, and how he tackled PR strategies and how he made it work for him in terms of evaluating the effectiveness on his or the brand he was working for at that time. Thank you very much, Ben. So we want to bring it towards the local scene. Beatrice, what approaches do you use to evaluate whether public perception aligns with the brand's core purpose?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stanley. So at PuzzleCraft, my PR Communications consulting agency, what we do is we have the strategy we deploy is a purpose to performance approach. So from the onset, we begin every campaign by clearly defining the purpose. Why are we embarking on this? Why does it matter? So it's not just about the brand. It's not just looking at the brand itself when we're doing that. We're also thinking about our audience, the audience we are shaping this strategy for, this communication for. So from the onset, okay, so after defining the why, we make sure we link the why, that's the purpose, with strategic SMART objectives. So we make sure they're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they are relevant, and they're time-bound. The whole idea is that we don't want what happened to Samuel, the whole vanity metrics talk that he's presented to his clients, number of likes and all that. They were like, so how does this affect the bottom line? Because really, as PR professionals and practitioners, we should always craft strategies that help the bottom line. So beyond the stories and all, when we are measuring this thing, when we are setting the objectives, we should make sure we set objectives that you can measure, and then at the end of the day, it translates. So take, for instance, for a launch of a new product, for instance, the kind of objectives we set is, okay, we're looking at, let's say, we could say securing at least 10 media placements in top tier national publications with 70% positive sentiments within the next 3 months. So they are measurable, they are time bound, they are basically in some way SMART. As again saying the number of likes, we are going to look at the post. We've got 10,000 likes and we're excited, because at the end of the likes don't really translate anything, I might just see the post and I like it, I go, but it doesn't change my perception. It doesn't influence my behavior towards what your campaign is all about. So that is one thing we do very well. We ensure we do, even though, those vanity metrics have been playing with your mind, making you feel good, by the numbers. Another thing we pay attention to, again, at PuzzleCraft is the relevance, as in relevant KPIs. KPIs are relevant to the business. So like we're looking at the trust scores, we're looking at behavioral change, like I said before, and perception shifts. I worked in regulatory, the financial regulatory space for years, and we are always churning out policies. We're always trying to communicate them in a way that, because basically we're just trying to change the behavior and the perception, shift the perception you get. So then really, it should all be geared at achieving these results. Another thing we do, again, to keep us, as a new agency, we came up with a framework that helps us. We call it the proof framework, PROOF. So proof, the P is for purpose, R, relevance, the first O is for outreach, the second O is for ownership, and then the F is for feedback. So basically, it helps us structure, it helps us when we're strategizing, from setting the purpose, ensuring relevance, designing the right outreach, assigning ownership and feedback. So it's just a whole cycle, a whole loop. We know what the purpose is, or rather we've identified the purpose, we've made sure that it's linked to the goals of the organization. We define SMART objectives, we do the KPI, we do the audience analysis, persona building, the persona and all, basically kind of modeling the race. But this we found that works for us. We decide on where our audiences are, or the audience of the clients we're working for are, what they do, the mediums they are consuming, information from and all that. Then while we've done that for the client side, in-house in the team, we do the whole assigning roles, who takes ownership, that's the next O, who takes ownership of this campaign. We'll make sure we cascade based on the resources we have and remember the goals we've set. And then we gather feedbacks, we evaluate it, because whatever you don't measure, like they often say, the popularly said, you can't manage. So at the end of the whole strategy and whatever it is we're putting in place to make the campaign a success, we create this feedback loop where from time to time we analyze the metrics, we look at them. Are our messaging right? Is it a tone issue? Do we have to tweak here, change this and that? So basically that's what we do. Thank you. So it's more like, okay, the purpose, the performance approach, and then our in-house proof framework. It helps us a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Beatrice. While you were speaking, I couldn't help but just go back to a framework that I had encountered myself, the smarter PR framework, where the M there stands for measurable. And you mentioned something about making sure that the metrics are measurable. And you've casually dropped 2 frameworks on us, but we'll revisit that later, because personally I'm going to take advantage of really understanding what they mean. The first one was your PRISM framework, and now we have the proof framework. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. So moving further in today's conversation, I want to go back to Ben, because you play a lot within the international space, and you've been opportune within your career as well to move from different market spaces. With your background in global market intelligence, how do you integrate geopolitical or market insights into evaluating brand purpose or performance?
Yeah. So yeah, I think actually it's gonna hit on some. I just want to say, Beatrice, I love the proof framework. I noted that down, and I'll be thinking about that after this call. So when you're thinking about integrating other data insights into your measurement program, I think it starts with a few things. First, it's audience, right? I think it's 2 things. Probably the intersection between audience, issues, topics, and devising a strategy that will allow you to collect that information in a way that is both precise, right? Because you want to be focused on the things that are important to your business, to your organization, and then also are accessible and provide utility on an ongoing basis. So the way we do that is it's applying. Well, this is starting to get into a bit of a tech conversation, right? So it's really, I think, coming down to evaluating what are your listening and tech solutions that you have within your stack as an organization, as an agency. And by that, I mean, what do you have in place for media listening, social listening? How are you accounting for platforms, be it Reddit, be it, elsewhere where conversations may be happening that are important for you to stay on top of. It could also include thinking about papers that are being published in academia, NGOs, from government organizations. A lot of these institutions, and we think about like within the Brussels world, like they'll offer API access to certain platforms. So you need to think about the audience and think about the issues, and then have a strategy in place, finding the right tech partner or solution to build together that information. And then it's about structuring it in a way that makes sense, right? So this is then starting to get into how do you craft and think about very specific Boolean strategies. How can you integrate those data by API into other sources? I know that's a bit, I don't want to get too technical, but I think if you start with those first two pieces that I mentioned around audience and issues, you'll be able to then have a strategy to make sure that that's part of your overall measurement program, because you don't want to just be focused, I think, as we've been saying, just on the results you're earning, or sometimes they're just being written about you as a business, but being able to collect signals that are going to provide intelligence and context and help with decision making.
Thank you very much, Ben. I think you were being cautious of going detailed into the technicalities of all that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I think I've also picked up the two things you mentioned, audience and issues or topics. Thank you very much for pointing that out. So he speaks on how when you're dealing with changing scenes, or especially in the global sense, you need to focus on these two things, and that in a way can help streamline any other problems or issues you might face down the line. Thank you very much, Ben. So we want to move into wrap-up questions, right? Just to bring today's events to a wholesome close. And I want to call on Samuel. What mindset shift or capability should PR professionals develop to evaluate purpose-driven communication effectively?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I believe that one way we can do this is to incorporate feedback evaluation into our strategy. So when we are coining those strategies, we spend so much time on strategy, on plans, on what we need to do, tactics, where we need to put our communication, where are we going to, all those things. When we are doing that, we need to also invest in feedback. We need to invest in evaluation. It should not be after the campaign has been done. That is when we now start to think about how do we gather data, how do we get that feedback. We need to incorporate it right from when we are doing this campaign. We need to put it, and then also, and of course, invest in it, because evaluation costs money. It's not just well, it could be cheap. It could be, you can find a cheaper way to do it, but we just need to be able to incorporate it right from when we are doing our strategy sessions, when we are doing all those strategies, all those graphs. We need to incorporate it at that point in time. Because in fact, you know, the interesting thing is that when you incorporate evaluation in your strategy session, it gives you more ideas because it will trigger some questions in your mind that you will be forced to answer, and that will also be, you know, help your creative juice to be able to answer those questions. So my advice, my advice in terms of my sheet is for us to be able to incorporate it while we are doing our strategy session, while we are, you know, coming up with ideas. That's when we need to do it. It should not be an afterthought. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samuel, for that. Still on advice, I want to call on Adeeba, a piece of advice for PR professionals who do not evaluate PR.
Hi, sorry. So one piece of advice. So I would say measure and evaluate, because that shows you if your communications and content and PR is effective, is meaningful, and adds value. I think it's important as professionals to do that. That should be built into every single PR and communications campaign, be it internally or externally. That is part and parcel of everything that we do. It should be part of our DNA as communications and PR practitioners, that we measure and evaluate our job and what we do on a daily basis. Because without it, why are we sharing information, content, communicating, delivering PR communications campaigns? For me, because if there is no measurement and evaluation to look at the impact, to look at the why, there's no alignment back to the strategy, purpose and objectives, then why are we doing it at all? Why is the organization undertaking such practices as releasing a PR, a press release into the media, sharing that news story with the media? What are we storytelling if there's no impact behind it?
Thank you very much, Adeeba, for that. Yes, that's something I would.
Special, as it's called. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
I apologize. Yeah.
It's all right. Okay. Also, Beatrice, what is one shift PR professionals need to make to better evaluate purpose-led communication?
Okay, so for me, I'll still hammer on vanity metrics. We place so much emphasis, as in we rely so much on vanity metrics, and like I said earlier on, they don't really add to the bottom line. And most organizations are beginning to understand this. So beyond crafting or showing, pulling up strategies around, okay, likes and all, we have to really give them things that make sense. So let's start thinking of, okay, are we building credibility? Are we inspiring action? You know, is the campaign or our strategies, are they aligning communication with the values and purposes of the people, and what the people are interested in, you know? And that brings also to mind the use of influencers. For some reason, PR practitioners just feel, look at this influencer, he or she has millions of followership, and and then we just feel, okay, we'll just bring them to the brand or introduce them to refer them to the brand, and we decide to use them, not first of all checking to see the kind of followership they have, to see if the influencers even align with the culture, with the values of the organization, or even the campaign, the message you're trying to push out. We've seen that happen in Nigeria in our context too. I remember when there was this NDLE campaign recently. So NDLE in Nigeria for Ben and so we've got this National Drug Law Enforcement Agency. So they practically are supposed to advise all, campaign against taking marijuana and all. But then they got an influencer who the whole of Nigeria not to be big on taking that. And when I saw that campaign online, the first that came to my mind was, who the hell was that PR manager? You know, because all they did was, I don't know the thoughts around it, but from the top of my head, I'll be thinking they saw Naira Marley. He's a musician, by the way, has a lot of likes. He has people that, you know, gyrate as a dance to his music, and he's got the beats, and they felt that was all that mattered, not knowing that he is not the perfect embodiment of the values of that agency. So you could just see that from the onset, there was flaw. It was a flawed campaign, because most likely they were looking at vanity metrics. So that's one thing I want every PR practitioner just put in mind as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. That's something we always harp on, especially in-house here at B+, the need to move beyond vanity metrics in an ever-shifting landscape. So thank you for mentioning that. I mean, it's not a surprise that it's something you would harp on. Okay, so we have some questions for our speakers that have been dropped in the note box, and I'll just quickly take 2 or 3 questions and target them at our speakers. So the first one I'll have to go for is to Ben. It says you have spoken about integrating geopolitical and market shifts into evaluation. How do you avoid overwhelming teams with too much data while making sure that they are tracking what truly matters to brand purpose?
Great. Great question. Thank you, Philip. So I think I alluded to this previously, but I think what we have to do in these situations is to be really, really focused and try to cut out the noise. And I think as communicators and as measurement professionals, work with our clients, our colleagues, other stakeholders, and get them comfortable with the fact that it's going to be impossible in some cases and potentially overwhelming to try to keep tabs on everything that may be happening about your brand, about your sector, about your market on a particular issue. And I think if you can, so some of that, right, that's a bit of people management. It's not necessarily a measurement question per se, but if you can have those conversations with the right people, agree on a framework, agree on the focus of what's truly important to track and to monitor, then that can inform your collection strategy. And from there, you can think about what's the right level of keeping people up to date on information. And that starts to get into things about thresholds on issues or flashpoints, or, you know, and looking, do we need to know about everything that's happening all the time, or do we only need to know when, let's say, conversation in its various forms on a particular topic reaches a certain point where we then want to dig into that and try to understand it. So it's a conversation of both, I think, aligning with your colleagues, your clients, and then having the right strategy in place afterwards.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben. I'm sure you did justice to that question. So the next question I would take to Adeeba. It says you emphasize internal communications and employee alignment. What small internal signals or feedback mechanisms do you personally find most revealing when assessing if purpose is truly resonating?
I go back to that initial, what I said earlier about being old-fashioned and still using focus groups and the conversations. For me, that shows the shift in the quantitative data, gives me that sort of first insight into measurement. But the why is answered through the focus groups and the conversations, either between myself and employees or leaders and their teams. And that gives me the better understanding as to if there has been impact as a result of a campaign. For example, safety, if there has been that slight shift or slight shift in dial and change in behaviour around safety, are we being more vocal about any unsafe practices? Are we being freer with sharing those unsafe practices and feeling psychologically safe to be able to do so as an employee. It just gives you that insight. It might just be one employee that reports and feeds back, but it's one more than you've had previously.
Thank you very much, Adeeba, for that. So we'll take one question to Beatrice. From your experience, what is the one subtle indicator you watch for that suggests a brand stated purpose is being genuinely believed by the public and not just acknowledged?
Okay, so for me, based on the previous work I've done, is behavioral change. Behavioral change is something we look at. I don't know if, okay, so in the Nigerian context, again, there was a time, there was this campaign against the abuse of Naira by the Central Bank of Nigeria. And then, thank God, the law enforcement agencies also harped on it. So what happens, Adeeba and Ben, in Nigeria is, and our audience is, when there's a party, you're celebrating your birthday, you've got some, maybe a wedding, some form of party, we are big at, on spraying the Naira, you know, and the central bank came up with, look, this is our national currency. It shouldn't be abused. And most often in the process of doing that, you see the people step on it, the spillage of drinks, water on it, and then we came up with a campaign. And we actually saw a behavioral shift, as in we are seeing it now, it's visible, because now at parties, you see a box, beautifully crafted box, and they'll drop it there and you drop your cash in the box, as against just spraying it. So that is what we look at. That is what I think, one of those things I feel we should look at. So beyond the numbers of license, there were actually a lot of pushbacks when that campaign came. Nigerians weren't understanding it. I mean, we believed, I was born into that tradition, you know, and then all of a sudden we're saying, forget about years of doing so. There was resistance. But then we saw behavioral change, and for me, it's made so much sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Beatrice. Being from here, I think I understand exactly what she's talking about. We were very present when all of that was happening, and the way it was carried out. Yes, thank you very much, Beatrice, for that. Perfectly answering that question. We have some other questions, but I think I'll just pick one more question, and it's one question that I think would resonate with today's event. It's what's the best way to reignite purpose internally when people seem disconnected from it? And I'll throw that question to Samuel as opposed to Ben, who's intended for.
Repeat the question, please.
Okay, the question is, what's the best way to reignite purpose internally when people seem disconnected from it?
Okay, so I think one of the ways is to continue to communicate. You can't over-communicate. You need to keep communicating and, of course, get the buy-in of top leaders. So as one of the panelists mentioned at the beginning of this call, it's not just in words, but in action. So we need to be able to ensure that leaders at the top, they are doing whatever they say they are doing. The vision or the objective, they are actually doing it. It's not just, you know, words on the wall. It's not just your mission, your vision on your website. It's, you know, it's action. Are they actually doing it? Because if they are not doing it, you know, it's just mere rhetoric, and we know that, okay, these guys are just, you know, they are just talking, they are not taking action. So the way you can inspire change, the way you can, you know, create more action is by ensuring that leaders, you know, do whatever they say they need to be done. They take action. So I think that's the way to go about it. Get leaders buying, and of course, as the PR person or as the com person in-house, make sure you are in the forefront of communicating, get the buy-in of your CEO. Because I used to tell people, when they say their CEO is not on their side and all that, your first public is your CEO, your management. You need to first get them on your side. They need to be able to understand you. You need to be able to understand them. They need to understand your ideas, your strategy, everything you are putting in place. If they don't understand it, all the strategy you are bringing, go and bring the best strategy from Harvard, it will not work. But you need to bring them on your side, and then for them to understand what you are saying, so that you can be able to inspire change in your organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel, for that. I think from today's session, from today's event, I myself can go and give a speech or a class on what evaluating what matters, because I think the speakers today have done thorough justice to the conversation, ranging from focusing on what matters, sharing frameworks that they have adopted in their own professional work, shifting landscapes, as well as the preparedness and the need to focus more on the purpose, as in objectives of every PR campaign. And I'm sure that every single one of us here, having listened to these professionals, having listened to the speakers, have some questions on their mind. Personally, I think some of the questions are, is your purpose clearly defined and lived? Do your audience truly understand and trust your intentions? And are your performance indicators capturing what truly matters? You know, not just to the stakeholders, but to the society as well. So I see Beatrice with her hand up. I think you want to say something, so the floor is yours.
Yes, please, Stanley, thank you. I saw a question for me, and it's how do you handle situations where leadership isn't interested in measurement or sees it as unnecessary? It is a valid question, and those I want to throw some light, and maybe the other speakers who could help me here, because this is something we struggle with as communications people. Okay, so the most part of my life I worked in the organization, so I worked from the client side. I just started my career with the on the agency side. So this is something. I mean, it is on a daily what happens. Sometimes you even actually measure it, and then nobody's looking at your data. They don't believe in your data. I mean, someone wants you to doctor it, like we say, to manipulate it. And for me, what has worked for me personally is that maybe because of my science background, I am big on data. And I believe it's really data collected electronically. So if, for instance, you present your data to me, I know we're within the same team, and we have access to the back end. I go back to check what's on the back end, just to ascertain that you've not, in quotes, doctored or altered the data. So for me, what I normally do is I try to convince them to see the reason, because the truth there is that data numbers don't lie. Data does not lie. And because most organizations are they are very concerned about the bottom line, So why expend so much money on a campaign when you're not bothered about how it translates to your bottom line? So you as the comms person, you should let them see, the reasons why you feel okay measuring these metrics. I mean, introducing metrics, the impactful metrics are important, and measuring them and actually allowing the data collected influence your decision, why it matters. Another thing I've seen again is Adeyemi touched on it slightly. Your primary audience as a comms person are those guys upstairs, up there. I mean, your CEOs and the decision makers. So you should be able to influence them. One thing I've seen happening is we always go through those people, or we sometimes go through those people via a middleman who dilutes the information. And then what it shows of you as a comms person is that you don't even know your onion. But when you're able to discuss with management, let them understand you, let them gain their trust to a large extent, they will be interested in this. And when they don't, if you've explored everything, Ibrahim, if you've explored everything and they don't accept it, document it. Document the fact that, okay, you wanted to do XYZ and then management didn't want XYZ, but in a nice way, so that when the chips are down, when it doesn't get to the bottom line, at least there's a document that protects you, that actually says, okay, you actually brought this up, but then it was turned down. That's what I would have done. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Beatrice, for that. I would like to apologize to the person who asked that question, seeing as it was such an important question. And I think Beatrice did due justice to that. I don't know if any of our speakers have something else to chip in. Or
I think just to say that, yeah, I think the data alone probably wouldn't get them to to get that buy-in. You might struggle, but I think to give it a bit more meaning, to add value to that data, have a bit of more of a story behind the data, that qualitative data, that why, will make them better understand what that data means, rather than just use the vanity metrics of data alone. Have a story behind it, evaluate it, and show them the meaning behind that data will then help that conversation and help sort of take it forward as a sort of cause for them to get that buy-in.
And so, Adeeba, while I still have you, there's a question I was directed at you. I might as well just take it. It's what advice would you give to someone transitioning from external communications to internal communications?
I think the one thing to always remember, and I say this, and it is my Adeeba's take on it, is that the only difference is your audience. Whereas your external audience is your consumer and customer, your internal audience is your employees. And for me, that's how I tackle PR and communications. We have channels, we have content, we have campaigns, we sort of measure, we evaluate, but what we and the advantage of internal communications, though there is an advantage, is that your audience, you have pretty much 99.9% of an idea as to the sort of what that audience, you've got a sort of a stakeholder map of your audience. It is very sort of finite as well, rather than a sort of an idea of a stakeholder map. When it comes to your consumers and customers, you don't exactly know them, whereas your internal audience, you do have a better idea, and you really do know how many you've got, what their sort of makeup is, what exactly their needs and wants are, whereas or you could find them out if you don't know, whereas you have an idea, but you don't have that exact data. But for me, it's always, apply the same principles that you do externally. As having worked in external media relations, the only difference is my audience, who I'm communicating to, and whatever you're communicating to internally or externally, always share that first with your internal audience, rather than go external first and then come back to your internal audience. There's two rules.
All right, thank you very much, Adeeba. So I would also like to extend thanks to everyone for being a part of today's insightful session. I think it has been holistic in every way. We've explored what it truly means to evaluate what matters, not just in metrics and milestones like Adeyemi stressed on, but in meaning. And we could see that across all our speakers when they talked about it. Our conversation around purpose, perception, and even performance, has reminded us that success today isn't just about what we achieve, but how we do it and why we do it, and also the perception that surrounds that campaign or the performance thereabout. A big thank you to the incredible speakers for today. They've shared expertise, experience, and perspective on the shifting landscape. And to everyone who joined us, the questions were brought in, the engagements, reflections. I think all of that has made today's event a much richer one. So let's keep the conversation going. This is something that we can all agree at this point. We've listened to 4 of them who are, at the top of their game, say practically this is very important. So I think this is a conversation we have to keep going wherever we are at work, in our spheres and in our professional line of work. We need to keep this going. So definitely we would love to have you guys on some other future events. But until then, thank you so very much for availing us this time of day. And just before we leave, if there's anything any of our speakers would like to say, probably to the other speakers, this is the time for that.
Just thank you. Thanks for the conversation today. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
for the conversation. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. I have been Omadiala Stanley, and this is the 29th edition of the Evaluate PR. Until the next one, thank you guys so very much for being a part of this, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Stanley. Okay.
Thank you, Stanley. Bye.